You're going to bleed faster than you would if you're standing still. So they would get horses that run these buffalo and then shoot them so they bleed out. So here's some strategies. We're on foot. They wore disguises, such as camouflage we use today. During the winter months, they would run the buffalo into the deep snow for easy kills and use snowshoes to get to them. Either on foot or horses, they would run the buffalo off high bluffs or cliffs for easy kills. Wouldn't even have to shoot them or let them bleed out. And then when they finally gained access to horses later, they would run the buffalo as hard as they could to get their blood pumping and allow the buffalo to bleed more profusely when shot, causing an earlier death. Okay? That's kind of what they did as a hunter. That was their goal. Now I'll tell you what they did as a protector or warrior, some of the differences there. Okay? First of all, what's the bow used by a Plains Indian warrior look like? Same bow, hardwood, oak, form of the shape of the new moon. So the bow for the hunter and the bow for the warrior is the same. How about the arrows? Are they still made out of willow? They are actually. But how many feathers do they have? Two. Okay, they don't need a guide arrow because the goal is to fire them as fast as they can. Accuracy's not the main thing because you're going to fire as many as you can, get as many off. And these arrows actually flew faster because they had one less feather. Okay? So the arrows were also made of willow, but they were designed with two feathers, made it easier to fire at a rapid rate, flew faster, reached the target more rapidly. And the arrowheads were the same. They were originally stone, but later transgressed into metal from barrel hoop. And the arrow size was the same, elbow to the tip of the finger plus a hand. But the two-feather arrow was placed in the arrow horizontal because it's shooting at an enemy, the ribs are the other way. Okay? So you can note the differences if you'd like. Now, the average Plains Indian warrior usually was equipped with a bow and about 100 arrows. They also had a bison hide shield and a long spear. That's kind of how they went into battle. Okay? A bow, about 100 arrows, a bison hide shield, and a long spear. That's generally what they were equipped with when they went into battle. What'd they do with those buffalo hide shields? Anybody know? You'd like to know which one's yours, so what might you do? Paint it, put designs on it. Let it know it's yours. And also they would motivate themselves by painting things on those buffalo hide shields that would give them strength and motivation. Okay? Whatever they felt. Okay? Now, in early days, that's all they had, but as Westerners came west, so to speak, what did they gain control of? Guns, yep. So after the introduction of the gun to the West, many Indian warriors carried these into battle as well. At first they didn't. When we had early Native American history where tribes were fighting tribes prior to westward expansion, they never had the access to guns. But once man started moving westward, they got a hold of such things, okay? I don't know the exact number, but I can tell you we'll talk about it. At the Custer battle itself, I think there were 56 different cartridges found used by the Indians during that battle. That's how many different type of guns they had accumulated by the time we got into that battle of 1876. So anyway, the introduction of the gun made a big difference. Now, if you were a Plains Indian warrior, there were two specific ways you could prove your worth to the tribe. If you were a Plains Indian warrior, there were two specific ways you could prove your worth to the tribe. Okay, basketball players in here? Okay, what's a way you can prove your worth to the team?
Show everyone up.
What?
Just show
Well, give me an example of that.
Be like the lead scorer.
You'd be the leading scorer, or maybe the leading rebounder, or maybe you held their best defensive player to 6 points when he was averaging 35. You had to show your worth. How could a Plains Indian warrior show his worth?
Kill more than the others.
close. Well, now we'll get to that. One thing was by stealing enemy horses. Lots of guys, Plains Indian warriors, got their girl by trading many stolen horses to the father in exchange for the daughter. Now they were courting, it wasn't a weird deal, they were courting, but if you wanted to marry an Indian chief's daughter, or even another warrior's daughter, you had to get permission, but you also had to what? Give them a few horses. That was a deal. That was a deal. And so that's one thing, is they stole enemies' horses. That was a big deal. If you came back with a bunch of horses from the enemy, you were all right. What was another way, Donovan? Kill a lot of people, you said, but actually it wasn't the killing. It was showing bravery in the face of the enemy. So, weird scenario, but if Larkin and I are fighting each other, and he's got a knife and I got nothing, except for this shoe right here, every time he comes at me with that knife and I miss him, I'm going to give him one of these. And he comes at me again, I'm going to give him another one of these. And I'm keeping track of how many times I hit him with my coup stick during the time we're battling. And to show bravery, a warrior would approach an enemy, touch them, and come back unharmed, usually with the coup stick. That showing bravery in the face of the enemy was referred to as coup. Keeping track of said times became known in American Indian history as counting coup. Counting coup. So, to show bravery, a warrior would approach an enemy, touch them, and come back unharmed. And showing bravery in the face of an enemy like this was referred to as coup. And keeping track of how many times they did that in his life was called counting coup. Yeah, that was a big deal. Really big deal. How many coups have you counted in your life? That was a big thing. Now, as I mentioned before, the first violent fighting on the part of Native Americans occurred between Indian tribes before the emergence of the white man west. And some of the bloodiest encounters between tribes usually occurred after one of the chiefs had been killed. Really weren't supposed to kill the chief, okay? So if an Indian broke the rule, an Indian tribe broke the rule and killed the other Indian tribe's chief, that got bloody. I mean, really bad bloody, okay? Now, in these battles, the dead were often scalped and mutilated beyond recognition. In these battles between Indian tribes, the dead were often scalped and mutilated beyond recognition. And this tradition continued in the battles between the Plains Indian warriors and the United States military. So, if there was an Indian victory, most often the soldiers that were killed were mutilated beyond recognition and scalped. Why did they do that? Anybody know why they mutilated and scalped and disfigured the dead after a battle? Anybody? Well, no.
So it made it harder for them to tell who they lost?
What?
So it made it harder for them to tell
No,
who
it
they
had to do with
lost?
religion.
Well, we don't know which side
What did Indians believe in? Reincarnation. And they believed that they would meet their enemy in the afterlife, and they wanted to have that enemy at the biggest disadvantage possible. So if you were in a battle and killed an enemy, and you chopped off both the enemy's arms, for example, when you fought them in the afterlife, they wouldn't have any arms. That's exactly right. That was their belief, and that's why they did this. So the Indian philosophy behind the mutilization of the dead had to do with the Indian belief of the afterlife or reincarnation. An Indian believed they might meet their enemy in the afterlife and wanted them at a disadvantage. Okay, so that was one kind of form of religion that went with battle. You know, another form was, what did they do before they went into battle? They looked at their religion for strength. What did they do? Anybody know anything about Native American history? What did they do before they... What was the name of the warrior god? The Great Spirit. So a chief or a warrior that was going into battle would look to the Great Spirit to give them direction. How did the Great Spirit give him that direction? What did the Indian have the night before battle?
Powwow.
A vision.
Yeah.
Anybody know what a vision is? Vision's like a hallucinative dream.
Yeah.
Go ahead, I was just gonna tell you, peyote. Anybody know what peyote is? It's kind of like modern day what?
Weed.
Marijuana, or in the 1960s, LSD was a hallucinogenic that would, you'd take LSD and you'd have these weird visions and dreams and flashbacks. It was just kind of crazy. You'd go on an LSD trip, would be the same thing. So peyote was a plant that Indians consumed that would get them high, so to speak, and give them hallucinations, right?
Yeah, it wasn't like it's on the plant they added.
Well, they added all, yeah. But the point is that a chief or warrior would look at the Great Spirit for direction through a vision, and this vision was a dream of what was to be in the upcoming encounter. So if you had a dream as a warrior that you were getting beaten to your battle, that's kind of probably how it went, okay? If you had a vision that you were winning in battle, that's supposedly how it went. I'll tell you a real quick story about something. This is off the topic, but I'll give you a point since we're talking about visions. I am a lifetime member of the Custer Battlefield National Preservation, which means I have access to anywhere I want to go on Custer Battlefield and anywhere I want to go on the Reno Charge Area, which is not part of the battlefield. But if you don't know anything about the Reno Charge Area, one of Custer's 3 groups of men that he charged, you don't know anything. But anyway, a fellow by the name of Jason Pitch owned the Reno Charge Area. It's where Captain Reno charged the village while Custer went up on top. And they were going to kind of surround it, but they didn't realize how big the village was. We'll get to that, okay? But anyway, Jason Pitch owned this land in the 1990s. His family were farmers. Well, he got kind of interested in this Custer battle, and so he got a metal detector or several and started going all over that Reno Charge Area, which had never been touched because everybody, it was private land, everybody concentrated on the Custer battlefield, which was government owned. He found cartridges. He even found a ring that belonged to a soldier by the name of Donald McIntosh, and inside the ring, which was still on the finger bone, was MM plus DM equals 76. Mary McIntosh versus Donald McIntosh equal 1876. Found the guy's wedding ring. I had it on my finger. It was incredible. But this guy had this land, and they found all kinds of stuff. And a guy by the name of Glenn Swanson, who was a big Custer collector from California, came in, and he financed a museum that was called the Reno Benteen Museum, because that's another part of the fight. And he brought all of his stuff that he had that belonged in the Custer and such to display, and all of this stuff they found on the battlefield, including that ring. They also dug up a complete skeleton of a horse and found on the horse the saddle with farrier's equipment that had all the horseshoer's equipment, and it had a JS on it. There was only one farrier that fought with Custer that had JS John Severson, and they identified all of it. It gives me goosebumps. It was unbelievable, the stuff they found. And they went out there and put stones up where people fell and recreated the Reno Charge, which nobody had any clue about. It was the coolest thing ever. I'll tell you the bad end of the story. But anyway, one of the things they found on that Reno Charge in the village area was a army pot, basically a cooking pot that had been smashed flat, that Sitting Bull had scratched in his vision of the battle of the Little Bighorn. It was worth, they used that, it was worth $500,000. They used that for collateral to build the museum. I'm not kidding you, this was an unbelievable find. It was untapped stuff, and it was the coolest stuff ever. Matter of fact, I have a book right here that's called Little Bighorn Remembered, that has all of this stuff in it that was found. And if I can slip through this real quick, I'm going to see if I can just get lucky and find, for example, that ring. But anyway, this Jason Pitch turned his ranch or farm into this historical site, which was unbelievable. Well, he got himself in trouble with pornography and got sent to prison. And guess who took all of his stuff and all of the stuff they found at the battlefield because his money was involved in it all? Glenn Swanson took everything back. It was the saddest thing I ever saw in my life, and it's no longer there. But I'll tell you, this was a great story, and we'll talk more about it, but I want to show you this ring that I had on my little finger. Here it is, right here. They found that thing. It was buried under the ground at the Reno Charge, and inside the ring it says DM plus MM equal 76, and the finger bone was in the ring. Okay? But once they started getting into this, it was kind of inspired because they had a great big fire at Custer Battlefield in the 80s, and it burnt everything down, which made it easier for people to find things, right? And this is where they had found all these cartridges and determined that like 56 different weapons were used on the Indian side during this particular battle, because these were not Army-issued weapons that they found cartridges. You see what I'm saying? So it's quite a story. So my point is, behind telling you that story, is that vision was important, and that vision was drawn by Sitting Bull on that Army pot and was found on that battlefield, and it financed the entire $500,000 museum. So anyway, we'll go from there. Okay, tomorrow we're going to talk again about the Fort Laramie Treaty, just go through that again, and we're going to lead towards building forts on the Bozeman Trail and talk about one in particular that's near Sheridan, which is Fort Phil Kearny. Okay?
So that museum's no longer there?
No, the building's there, but there's nothing in it. It just looks terrible. It was the most awesome thing you ever saw. They had stuff in there, Custer's saber, Custer's buckskins,